There's something about the way that men view their ideals that women don't, that I think is very important. There's a study about how men and women play. I think it was actually by Lego, but I might be wrong. But it was about how men and women play. I guess I should say how boys and girls play and how it's different. They basically found that when boys play, they become the thing they're playing as. So, boy has a He-Man toy, he's playing as it. The boy becomes He-Man. No longer is he Joe, he is now He-Man, plays as this character, who is, for all intents and purposes, his ideal, right? But when girls play, let's say a girl's got a Barbie, the Barbie becomes the girl. No longer is it Barbie, it is now the girl, because the girl's ideal is the self, right? And that's why you get this disparity when it comes to like all the protests and complaining that things like Barbie, oh, it's unrealistic standard, da da da, and they get so self-conscious because they're their own ideal, yet the toy they're playing with, looks better than them. Maybe they're fat or ugly or something, and so they get self-conscious and it's an unrealistic standard. Meanwhile, boys will have a He-Man toy who's like super jacked, and will be like, oh yeah, that's awesome. That's how I want to be. Looking up to the ideal versus placing yourself as the ideal, which I think has to do with narcissism. I think women are typically probably more narcissistic. But how does that impact stuff like Dragon Ball? How does that impact the popularity? Well, I think a big part of it is people like Goku, Vegeta, Gohan. Those are ideals, right? In multiple ways, not just in the terms of hard work, in the terms of brotherhood, power, stuff like that. That young men typically see that and think like that's how I want to be, and it's all achievable, right? It's like the harder you work, the more powerful you become. It's not like a lot of comic books where your powers are accidental or they're circumstantial. In Dragon Ball, they're attainable, right? If you're willing to put in the work, which I think is very appealing to boys to be able to see that. And maybe not so much to girls. Another big part of it is the idea of like righteous violence, right? Standing up for what's right, taking on powerful enemies more powerful than you, being willing to give it your all and possibly lose but come back stronger. That kind of thing is very prevalent. I think very appealing. Alongside what goes hand in hand with that, again, like I said, hard work, training, etc. And comics, I think, don't do quite as good of a job typically when it comes to stuff like that. The achievability and usually training is not there the same way as like Dragon Ball. But when we're watching the show, it's like we become the heroes, right? We imagine ourselves as those people, where maybe girls typically don't. And like I said, a big part of it too is brotherhood, because the bond of, say, Goku Vegeta, Goku Gohan, even the idea of enemies becoming your allies, Piccolo, even Buu at this point, kind of Frieza at this point, Vegeta obviously is a big one. That's, I think, very prevalent for a reason, and that's that sort of idea of mutual respect, which is a big thing, I think, for guys also. Whether or not you necessarily agree or like one another, there is a mutual respect between the two of you. And I think that comes from this power, right? So that's also a very good thing that they've added in. I think that's why it's a pretty good show for like boys and young men to watch, because it does instill a lot of this into you. And again, that thing with enemies, that idea of like a competitive rivalry between one another, pushing each other to get better. Because that's the thing that I feel like women don't like. They don't want a competitive rivalry, because that means one of them is going to lose. And they don't want that. They want everything to be fair and nice and even, and they don't want to cause any conflict or ruffle any feathers. But guys, I think, are a lot more willing to do that because it is in the pursuit of this higher goal of bettering not only yourself but each other, which is what will happen. And I think there's a big part of like pushing yourself and willing to suffer to get stronger, which is extremely prevalent in the show. That's like the whole idea behind the hyperbolic time chamber, among many other things. as you go into this place where the conditions are so difficult on your body that one day in there is like training a whole year, because you're being willing to sacrifice happiness and endure suffering for the betterment of your future, which is a huge, huge concept, right? It's one of the things that sets us apart from the animals, being willing to do that, like a delayed gratification type of thing. But it's even more prevalent here because it's rejecting the entire idea that happiness is even desirable. Because if it was, they wouldn't be doing this. They're not doing this. They're not training. Even though Goku's a very happy character, that's not because of what he's doing. That's because of who he is, right? Happiness, I don't think, is a goal for any of them. And I think that's an admirable thing for young men also, is that that's an important lesson that I think you have to learn. And that, I know I'm picking on women a lot, but just as a contrast, I feel like women don't have that the same way. I feel like in life, they want happiness more than they want achievement, while men want achievement more than they want happiness. And you can think about that yourself. Maybe not even in your own life, but think about your children if you have children, or even if you don't. Think, would I rather my child have a happy life or a life of great achievement? Because those things are exclusive, right? If you're achieving great things, you are overcoming great hurdles, which is not easy. You're willingly taking on hardship and burden in order to overcome them and make yourself better and make yourself stronger. You are getting up and you are doing something. You're leaving the nest and you're facing a scary world out there. And that's what we see these characters do all the time, is they leave in pursuit of challenges to be overcome for the betterment of themselves, the rest of the world, and in many cases, the entire universe. And I think that's incredibly appealing and hits home for a lot of people so that it can rival these huge mega corporations of like Marvel and DC and all their characters, with just this one show that's been around, or I guess the manga too, since like the 80s. It's really quite impressive. But yeah, I think it's incredibly important to realize those things and to recognize that there is a lot of truth in that, and there's a lot of admirable qualities in that for men, I think it's a good thing. I think it's something that we should do more of and take more note of in our own day-to-day life. It's just some thoughts I had off the top of my head here that I've been thinking about. Let me know what you think. I'll see you in the next video.